Welcome to the Hope Natural Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin Ellis, your host. On this show, we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. What if there was a garden and fruit tree in every yard? This is a question that Greg ponders every day. For over 32 years, he created one of Phoenix's first environmental showcase homes for urban farming. The quarter-acre yard featured a primarily edible landscape with over 80 fruit trees, rainwater and greywater harvesting, solar applications, and extensive use of reclaimed and recycled building materials. What we now call an old growth food forest. He is the founder of urbanfarm.org and the host of the Urban Farm podcast and has over 800 episodes on his podcast. I'm super excited for this conversation today. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Well, before we dive into urban farming, tell me a little bit about how you got into this.
Oh my gosh. I think I was born with it. I came into this life at the age of 9, which would have been, for me, that would have been 1970. I was looking at getting a fish aquarium, and I was interested back then in fish farming. And through the 70s and 80s, I ran a business where I was building backyard aquaculture ponds for people. And somewhere along the way, when I was in my mid-teens, I wrote a paper on how we were overfishing the ocean. So it's something that was given to me that I just had to pay attention to.
Oh, I love that. So what is urban farming for those that this might be a new term for them?
Yeah. And I boiled it down really simply. Grow food, share it with somebody, and name your farm.
Okay.
And, most people live in cities these days, I think, and I don't know this to be a factual number, but I think somewhere around 75 or 80% of the people in the U.S. live in cities. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're consuming food at. So over the past couple of decades, I have really come to believe that the place to solve our food system issues is right where we're living, in the cities. Mm-hmm. And urban farming can be what I did in Phoenix, which was growing food in my front and backyard. In fact, while I was a student at ASU in the early aughts, I was farming my front and backyard and going to a farmer's market once a week and making $300 or $400 a week cash just by harvesting the stuff out of my yard and taking it, taking it to a farmer's market. Yeah. Or there's warehouses now that they're doing hydroponic farming in, and there's urban orchards and aquaponics and hydroponics. There's so many different ways you can grow food. Mm-hmm. And I am just a huge believer that we need to be doing that in the cities where we live.
Yeah. So you've said it a couple of times, like solve a lot of problems, firm believer in it. So why do you believe growing your own food is so crucial in today's world?
Well, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the number of recalls that have been happening lately. I see them daily, food being recalled from our industrial food system. There's also been a lot of movement with moms across America. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
They're an organization, and they're actually doing pesticide and herbicide testing of mainstream foods. Mm-hmm. And they're finding a lot of chemicals in mainstream foods that you would see at your fast food restaurant or, in the grocery store aisles. Mm-hmm. And so there's what's in our food, and then there's the problem of shipping food. And you might say, well, hold on, what's the problem with shipping food? Problem with shipping food is that if they ship it, they have to harvest it before it's ripe. And that goes to nutrition. If you're harvesting a peach or a tomato before it's ripe, it's not fully nutrient dense. Mm-hmm. And then what happens when you harvest that fruit or vegetable, it starts degrading nutritionally. Do you know what food miles is?
Food miles?
Food miles.
I have not heard that term. Please educate.
It is the miles that food travels from where it is grown to where it's eaten. And there is a magic number that they've figured out in the United States on how many miles. What might you guess that would be?
Oh gosh, I bet it's high.
Yes.
I think it's high.
1,500 miles.
1,500?
1,500 miles. So then there's all the environmental impact of shipping the food, but there are so many issues these days with the quality of our food. Everything we just mentioned, that growing your own food, you have control over what goes in it. So you can grow food organically if you want, which I highly suggest. And when it's picked, I'll tell you what, if you pick a ripe peach off of a tree, when you walk up to the tree and it drops in your hand and you take a bite of it and it splashes down the front of your shirt and the taste of it makes your toes tingle, you will never be able to buy a peach from the store again. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's a few of the things that are going on with our food system that we need to address.
Now, you've talked about growing your front and your backyard. It's really, I guess, motivating to hear that you did that here in Arizona because you know of our climate and it's so hot, and a lot of times our crops here, I call them crops. I have a little raised bed garden, like a tiny one. It's nothing, but I still grow stuff. I call them my crops, and it's hard to keep alive because it's so hot. So for us in Arizona, tell us some benefits and still that we can still grow food.
Oh yeah. Well, there's strategies.
Okay.
I live in Asheville, North Carolina now, and we get a winter.
Yep.
And
So same thing.
Right. Where you have a winter, you're not growing in the winter.
Right.
Bob McClendon of McClendon's Farms years ago told me, he said, Greg, I stopped growing in July, August, and September because it's just too dang hot. So that's one thing to do is pay attention to the climate where you're growing and grow at the appropriate times, because you can grow October through June very easily in Phoenix. I know, I did it for over 40 years.
Yeah. So what do we do in the months that we can't grow?
What I normally do is there's something called a cowpea. And a cowpea loves the heat. It's a nitrogen fixing plant. You can actually eat the beans that come out of the pea pod, and they love the heat. Okay. So what I would do in my gardens in the summertime is grow cowpeas and, interestingly enough, sweet potatoes. And when you're growing them and they're shading the ground, it is dropping the ground temperature by as much as 50 degrees. Oh wow. Which is huge.
Yeah. What I know citrus trees are big out here in Arizona. So what are some of the key benefits of having a garden and even a fruit tree in every yard? And also, I know that it takes a while to grow things. So how do we have the patience to sit there and wait? It takes maybe, I could be wrong, but a year or so for a tree to populate some fruit. Is that correct?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. Yeah.
3 years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a long time. So how can we, is it worth the wait?
I don't know. Is it worth the wait?
I mean, in my brain, yes, because of what our industrial food is like.
Exactly. And that's something your listeners have to, take into consideration. Here's the thing. On a third of an acre in Phoenix, now I had a flood irrigated yard, so I had flood water coming in, but this can also be done on non-flood irrigated properties. I had over 80 fruit trees on my property.
Oh, wow.
I had, you mentioned it in my bio, an old growth food forest. And basically what that means is that all there was for me to do over time, I created the space. So I just went out and harvested food. Things just magically grew in the yard. And I had a lot of citrus trees. And I would eat oranges off of my orange trees. I had 3 different kinds that I loved: Washington navels, Caracara navels, and Trovita oranges. And I would eat them pretty much nonstop from the end of November into April.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had fresh oranges, and I would go out in the yard and just harvest 3 or 4 of them and eat them as I walked through the yard. It is free food for the picking. Now, it took a little bit of energy and money to get them planted and started.
Mm-hmm.
But, once they're up and running, they're just there.
Yeah.
I had an apple tree in my backyard that produced 250 pounds of apples every year, which is an immense amount of fruit that I made apple chips, apple butter, apple sauce, apple cider.
Mm-hmm.
I even had some people in 2014 when I was in Croatia for a month. They came in and harvested the tree and brought me apple wine off of my tree. So, it's a process to get these things started,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very fulfilling once you get it going.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, mine's very small, but I have cucumbers going right now. And it is,
Nice.
I've never seen a cucumber look like this in a store. And it actually tastes really, really, really good. And you're 100% accurate. And I can vouch for it that I never really want to buy a conventional cucumber again after I just grew them in my own little garden, because they taste good. And and what's also interesting, and you mentioned this in the beginning, because they pick crops before, or fruit or vegetables before they're even ripe, this cucumber's lasting a really long time in my fridge, even cut. And if I were to buy even organic at like Trader Joe's or Sprouts, it goes bad really quick.
Yeah. Well,
is that due to the picking it before it's ripe?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here in Asheville, I'm addicted. I have an addiction problem to oranges. And so what I've started noticing is we're getting toward the end of the season
Mm-hmm.
for oranges, just generally in the United States. And the oranges that I'm picking up at the grocery store now are not lasting as long as they did 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And that's because, they've been picked off of the tree now for maybe a couple, 3 months in storage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
True. So let's talk about really like the basis and the top factor for where a garden starts, and that's the soil. So can you talk about how important soil is, even like growing your own food, and also the soil in industrial, and why we don't get nutrients like we used to decades ago because of our soil?
Yeah. So let me start by saying I have been here 2 years in North Carolina now, and we bought 4 acres and we had no growing spaces. And I have been spending more money on soil than anything else. You get what you pay for. You want Omni certified, OMRI, OMRI certified soils for your garden beds. So I've been, and I'll spend $30 on building a raised bed and $300 to put the soil in it.
Wow.
There's 5 components of healthy soil. Those things are dirt, airspace, water, organic matter, and everything that's alive in the soil. And what we have in Arizona is dirt. Sorry.
It's okay.
I hope you can edit that
Real
out.
life. Do you want to edit that, Bill? I guess we're going to edit it, because I just said, do you want to edit that?
Yeah, we'll cut this out.
Okay.
I muted my phone. Sorry about that.
Let's start back at the previous question.
Hold on. What'd you say?
Let's start back at the previous question. Give me a place to cut.
Just start with the 5 components of the soil.
Correct.
Great. So there's 5 components of healthy soil: dirt, airspace, water, organic matter, and everything that's alive in the soil. And in the desert, we have about 0.5% of organic matter in the soil. And that is the key component. That organic matter really brings on everything else in the space. When you add organic matter, which is compost or woody mulch or planting mix, when you're adding that, it's bringing airspace, it's allowing the water to get in, and it's bringing the life to the soil. And what we need for our gardens to grow healthy, really good tasting food is a healthy amount of life in the soil. That life, the microbes and the bugs and all that stuff, they work with the dirt and other components of the soil and help bring out the nutrients so that the plants can uptake them. So building healthy soil is the single most important thing you can be doing, and you do that by adding lots and lots of compost and organic matter. Now, you asked about the industrial system, and what we do in our industrial system is we have basically used up the soil. The soil is nutrient deficient in so many ways, so that the food they're actually growing in industrial fields is lacking a lot of the nutrients because they haven't been taking care of the soil. The other thing is that your listeners absolutely need to know is if you are eating any grains at all, you have to make sure that you're eating organic grains. Because what the industry does now is they, at the end of the life cycle of, say, wheat, they will go in and spray glyphosate on the wheat in order to basically dry it up. It kills it. So they're spraying that poison on the wheat to dry it up so it's easier to harvest. Well, guess what? That glyphosate is still on the grains as it enters the system. And I mentioned Moms Across America a little earlier today in our talk, and they're doing all kinds of testing, and they're finding massive amounts of herbicides in food that's not organic. And I just recently saw another article that 98% of the cereals, non-organic cereals on the shelves has glyphosate and other chemicals in it, that's insane. And we're
why
taking
isn't
that
it
in.
banned? Why is it not banned yet?
Right? Why isn't it banned? Well, and here's the thing. I know you work with hormones with people. That is messing with people's hormones. The glyphosate works by eliminating nutrients and minerals out of the space it's working in. So
Oh, it's awful. And I actually just saw something on social media from, I don't know, another account that there's actually a lot of research coming out that there's even still pesticides on organic labeled foods that are in the stores. Why do you think that is? It's because my brain is like, well, because they probably have like non-organic next to the organic, and then they're spraying the non-organic with pesticides. That's, the wind is like making the droplets come on the organic. Is that probably why we have that?
Yep, it's called drift.
Drift, yes.
Yes, exactly.
And same thing with, treating a yard with pesticides, like the bug man comes, the drift can get over into your yard, because I am just doing some environmental testing, repeat testing on myself, and I still have a decent amount of glyphosate, and I don't eat a lot of non-organic foods, and I try and stick to the clean 15 and all of that, but I still have glyphosate, and it's like it's one of those things where it's just really hard to avoid, so you have to do what you can, and I think starting with growing your own food is one way you can control it.
Exactly. So you actually did glyphosate testing?
Yeah, so it's on a lot of environmental toxin panels that you can get ordered by your doctor, naturopathic doctor, or functional medicine doctor. Yeah. So I did it. Yeah, I did it in 2020, and I had high levels, and I still have high levels, but it's down. So now I'm working really hard on trying to, I haven't worked probably in the last 4 years super hard on trying to get it out and detox from it and bind it up and stuff. So that's what I'm working on now. But yeah, I would say every time I do some sort of environmental testing on a patient, they have moderate to high levels of glyphosate, because it's everywhere. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it
and
is.
then we're wondering why we have such a, epidemic of disease around, and why is cancer happening so often?
Yeah.
It's like we got to look at the environment. So let me ask, if someone is inspired now to start their own garden, what would be 3 easy ways to start growing their own food?
Cool. So number 1, I have a quiz question for you. What's the most expensive thing to buy in the store and the easiest thing to grow?
Most expensive thing to grow in
You can grow them in your windowsill.
like herbs?
Exactly.
Yeah. Any herbs?
Exactly. Yep. Any herb, basil,
Okay.
oregano,
Yeah.
thyme, parsley. It can be grown in a pot in a windowsill. And who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't love fresh basil? We had a pizza the other night and we harvested fresh basil out of our yard and just put it right on top. Who doesn't love
Yum.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the number 1 thing. The second thing to do is a pot on a patio. You can grow so much in pots. When we were in Phoenix, and Phoenix is a bit different story, you can't really grow much of anything in a pot in July, August, and September in Phoenix.
Yep.
Just know that. But
I can vouch for that.
yeah, exactly.
Everything's
And
dying.
so plan appropriately for what's in season. And we used to grow things on the front porch of our house, which had an eastern exposure, so it was out of the sun by about noon or 1 o'clock. And we used to grow just stuff in pots, lettuce, tomatoes,
Yeah.
basil. That can all be grown in a pot on a sunny on a sunny porch.
Yeah.
The third thing is one of my favorite things, and I'll just be straight up. It costs a little bit of money to get into it. Costs you about $800 or $900 to buy into one of these, but they're really, really effective and cool. And they're called a tower garden.
Yeah. I've seen
They're-
those.
Yeah, they're a product that is marketed by Juice Plus. So if you know a Juice Plus representative, they can get you one. And I bought my first tower garden in 2010 when they were first releasing them. And basically I've used it every year. In fact, in Phoenix, here's what we used to do in Phoenix. We used to grow lettuce in the tower garden throughout the summer inside the house. So that we would have, salads throughout the summer.
Yeah.
And lettuce and other greens are highly susceptible to the heat. So, usually in the Arizona area by about March or beginning of April, they've all gone to seed. So if you want a salad, you have to figure out something else to do.
Yeah.
And so I've had my tower garden for 14 years and used it many, many seasons to grow things. Again, it was like $900 to get into it in the first place, but now it costs me $50 a year in nutrients. It's long since paid for. And so that's one of my favorite things.
Is a tower garden, is that always indoor?
It doesn't have to be.
Oh, okay. But
Doesn't
for
have to be.
Arizona, you can do the lettuce and such so that's something you could use on starting now because it's hotter than sin here until the fall when it starts cooling off. That would be a good option.
Yes,
with some
exactly.
herbs in the window or some light.
Right, exactly. And for those of you in the Phoenix metropolitan area, True Garden is out in Mesa. They have a greenhouse and they have tower gardens. I think he's got like 600 tower gardens in a greenhouse, and
Oh, wow.
it's a really cool place to check out. For those
Where in Mesa? Do you remember?
Wrecker and University.
Oh, okay.
This place is called True Garden. Troy
True Garden
runs it.
Greenhouse. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm looking
he's a
it
rock
up.
star.
Oh, I see all their tower gardens. Yep, you're absolutely correct. Wrecker and University. I'll have to check
my
that
brain
out.
worked.
I know. It's all those good nutrients you're getting from your urban farm.
There you go. I want to throw something in here. I picked up an app about 3 months ago, and
Oh, no. Oh,
and it's
Greg, you cut out, so we're going to have to go back.
Just the app. Go back.
Yeah, start with you picked up an app.
okay. Cool. So a few months ago, I picked up an app for my phone called Yuka, Yuka. It is
Talk about that every day.
Do you really?
I love that app.
Love it. I just walk through the grocery store and scan the barcodes, and it gives me a rating on the products. And it doesn't tell us what chemicals are in the products,
Yes, it does.
unfortunately. Well, it tells us what additives are. When I say chemicals, I mean pesticides and herbicides.
Oh, yes. It just says pesticides or irritants or something like that. Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
But it gives you a rating from 0 to 100 on what's in this and what chemicals they use to process the food. And I absolutely love that app. I use it I'm walking through the grocery store. In fact, I was at the grocery store the other day, and there was this woman looking at this box of kids crackers, and I kind of quietly said, "Can I share something with you about that?" I scanned it, and it looked like she was probably buying it for her grandkids. And I scanned it, and it scanned it like 28 out of 100.
Yeah.
And I opened up the information about it and showed her what was in there, and she immediately put it back on the shelf.
Yeah, and one thing I love about that app, and I've talked about it a lot on podcasts, and even obviously if you're a patient of mine, but if you get a poor reading like that at 28 or low, it gives you at the bottom recommendations for a cleaner version or one that has a better rating. So I've had fun at my house, scanning things that I thought were good for me. And then I'm like, oh crap, this really isn't good. But yeah, I do the same thing in the store. I'm like, ooh, what does Yuka have to say about this product? It appears good, but let's see really what's in this thing. So yeah, I love that app.
Yes.
I had a question about... so and I don't know the name of it, but I'm pretty sure you do. But what are the names of those? They're pretty popular. The other gardens with maybe light. It starts with an H, maybe.
Hydroponic?
Yes. So can you speak about those?
I can. So hydroponic gardening is gardening with liquid nutrients.
Okay.
And the tower garden is hydroponic based. They call it aeroponics. And the way it works is that there's a pump in the bottom of this hydroponic system or the tower garden, and you set the pump to go off for maybe 10 minutes an hour, and it pumps water through the system and hydrates the roots of the plants. And that's the case for both the tower garden and the hydroponics. And if you're growing hydroponically, I highly suggest that you're using nutrients that are organic nutrients. There's OMRI certified, OMRI certified, so that they're minerals and not chemicals.
Okay.
Because that's another big problem with our industrial food system is the chemical fertilizers that they use on the food. So avoid those as much as possible.
Another question about the soil. You mentioned the OMRI, but then you said something about adding compost. Do you have to, or is that part of the OMRI soil? Like, I don't add any compost to my soil. Am I supposed to be doing that? And if so, what's good to compost without, getting crazy with it?
So OMRI is a certification like organic.
Got it.
And what I suggest that people do is they buy OMRI certified soils. And you can buy OMRI compost, you can buy OMRI planting bed mix. What I did at the urban farm in Phoenix for 32 years is every year or so, I would just add an inch or so of organic matter compost planting mix on the top of each bed.
Okay.
And in the 32 years that I was there, the garden beds, basically a dirt yard to 18 to 24 inches deep of really nice, healthy growing soil. And that happens simply because I would add organic matter to the top of the beds every year in the form of compost. Worm castings is another great thing to add to the top of your garden beds. And in Phoenix, if you have a lot of listeners in Phoenix, there's a couple of organizations in Arizona. One is called Tank's Green Stuff out of Tucson. They do OMRI certified soils and that kind of stuff. And then Arizona Worm Farm out in South Phoenix does great soil as well.
Oh, neat. Awesome. Well, Greg, this has been so insightful and educational for the audience and even myself, because I love to try and grow my own things. I'm just not, I don't have a lot of space for it, but you can still do. Yes. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, let me just throw in one more thing real quick.
Yeah, of course.
I still run a business in Phoenix. It's called the Urban Farm Fruit Tree Program.
Oh, nice.
And it's a fruit tree education program that people can jump into. We do monthly classes and then do a lot in the fall. And then people can buy fruit trees from us. And this is our
cool.
my 25th year doing it.
Neat.
And we sell in the Phoenix metropolitan area about 4,000 fruit trees a year.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody's interested in learning how to grow fruit trees in the desert, you can go to urbanfarm.org/root camp for a free master course that I put together. There's like 40 lessons in there.
Oh, wow.
And it's great for growing in the desert. And what I've learned in the past 2 years, it's also great for growing anywhere else, because the same things I was doing in Phoenix to grow trees, I'm growing things here. In the past 2 years, I've put 160 fruit trees in the ground.
Dang.
So,
I love that. Well, you keep it up. Keep, educating and promoting urban farming, because it's amazing, especially I don't think it's going to get any better here with industrial crops. So we'll wrap it up with one question I ask all my podcast guests. What would be your best or favorite health tip that you can share with the audience?
Number one, get that Yucca app. Number two, only eat organic food. I know it may cost a little bit more, but you're going to pay for it now, or you're going to pay for it later with healthcare costs. And
I agree. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we will see everyone again next week.